So far, can you hear me, George?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, so I was trying to get my iPad set up so I could immediately send anyone who couldn't join my link, but that I wasn't successful at doing that. So hopefully everybody figures it out.
Just didn't realize that was, what was that? Oh, back on again. Okay, yeah.
You're on.
Oh, okay, well, what happened to the screen here? Oh, there it is. Oh, it was got hidden by something else that popped up. I had my laptop became unplugged and it said, plug it in, you're almost out of power. So great. So yeah, it should be an interesting meeting.
Yeah. Well, we know it works. There's Lacey on.
Oh, well, that's good.
We're expecting about 34 more people.
Oh, wow. Holy crow. Jesus. I think everybody's picture is going to be pretty small. I don't know if I think I've been on maybe 16 or 17, but I don't think I've ever been that many people.
And I've got the meeting recording.
Oh, good. Okay.
There's Haas.
Hey.
I imagine you want water?
Hello, Ryan.
Hey, Ryan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Ryan.
How are
Hey,
you?
Ryan.
Hey, George.
Good.
Hey, Richard.
Hi there. Hi.
You got a pot of gold in the background.
No, it's a really interesting storm photo.
Oh, is that a big bolt of lightning coming down there with a
Yeah,
partial?
there.
Wow.
But nevertheless, there's a rainbow.
Yeah.
And then there's some sun stuff going on in the back. And yeah. Say, Matt,
Yes.
just want to thank you for your attentiveness to the MMCA question.
Sure.
Really appreciate that. You're always
Sure.
appreciate your thoroughness. So
Well, there's so much going on right now. I figured, it just got sidetracked. So
we had to have some meetings there are about 52 towns that we deal with, approach each year, and trying to figure out what to do this year, because we can't get to them, we can't get to their town meetings, and it's staff intensive. So we just finally, and that was decided to send letters to everybody. So the Damascotta letter got kind of held up while we decided to fit that in. But again, I appreciate because I wouldn't have known that it was missing.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. This is Haas.
Oh, hi, Haas. I was
Hey,
up.
Ron, how's the weather down there?
Cold.
Where are you?
Cold? Like how cold?
Oh, Florida.
What's
Ron.
it, 60?
No, it's way below that. One second. I'll give you the latest update.
51.
Can't you see his
It's 52.
background is blue ice?
But wind chill makes it feel like 47.
Oh, let's all go.
It is quite windy.
Glad you could make it, Ron.
Okay, glad to be here.
Never let the weather get in your way. Huh?
Nope.
What part of Florida are you living in, Ron?
Ormond Beach,
Ormond Beach, okay.
That
It's
east or
about-
west?
East Coast.
East Coast, yeah.
East coast near what?
I'm about, let me see, 25 minutes from Daytona
Okay,
or an hour from St. Augustine.
okay. My son lives in Stewart.
It's 3 o'clock.
God has spoken. Hey, George, do you still happen to have a copy of my engineering drawings for the house?
I'll have to look.
I
Remember
know.
if I do it? Yeah, I've run across it every so often. I keep meaning to give it back to you, but I'm just trying to think of what I did with it just to get it out of the way.
All right, no rush. I just don't want to lose it
Oh,
all.
no, it's not lost.
Okay.
Now that Doug has been home so much, he's discovered there are other parts to his house.
Yeah, thank God for the wood burner. I'll tell you, it heats this whole house so nicely. I can't believe it. I went through a tank of oil in less than 8 weeks. I said, no, I'm going to start burning wood again.
I enjoyed your comments on the muscle car.
Good. That was quite a find.
Yeah, there was. This is a car that had been in a lake, or I mean, in the water for a long time, and it was being dragged out and all covered with mussels. And somebody titled it, "This is a muscle car, MUSSEL." So Doug added a lot of his little pun quips to it.
Hi, Steve Huffnagel.
Hey, how
Hey,
you doing,
Steve,
Dick?
how are you?
Good. Hi, guys.
Hi, stranger.
Hey, Haas. How
How are
y'all
things
making
over
out?
at Coastal River?
What's that, George?
How are things over at Coastal River?
Oh, they're good. Thanks. Yeah,
Good.
yeah. We're yeah, the teams they're holding up. We sort of have a skeleton crew in the office spread out, and then we all take turns rotating through the offices to do our office stuff and some at home, and so harder to keep the team feeling all gelled. But actually, some of the committee meetings and stuff seem to work out better on Zoom in some places, like looking at lands, maps, and things like that works quite well on the share
Sure
screen.
cuts down the amount of travel time.
It sure does. It really does. Yeah.
Oh,
You know, I'm going to jump ahead and get started here. It's a
Sure.
couple minutes after, 3 minutes after 3, and I'm expecting that some people may have trouble getting on, so I've got my email up on my other computer, and I can get them the link if there's anybody having difficulty. But I don't see that yet. I'm Matt Lutkus. I'm the town manager for Damerscott, and I would like to just make some intro remarks. We're going to have about 30 people on the call. So far, I think 21, if I'm counting right. And so I think it would be good if when folks want to speak, if you're not the main speaker, to use the raise your hand feature. Mute the audio, except if you're speaking, obviously, or would like to speak. And let's see, rather than go through introductions, what I've asked Jan to do is introduce the folks from SLR, MMI, and and Wright Pierce and everyone from their side of things, the consultant side of things, and I'll introduce the folks from Damerscott. So yeah, and then getting into the substance of the meeting, what we got a George, Bob, and I got a preview this morning, and we decided what we think would be best is to not spend a lot of time on the sea level rise, the level on which we want to build the resiliency effort, the elevation that we want to protect from. Because I know the board's already decided that the committee's already decided we're in the 13-foot range, and Malone and McBroom SLR is coming up basically with the same recommendation, but all of that is going to be dependent on what the design looks like, and probably more importantly, what FEMA tells us is the design elevation we need to achieve the Clomer conditional letter of map amendment. So just so you can hear all the exciting details of the options that Jason Williams has prepared with regard to the wall and the park, I want to maximize the amount of time we spend on that. I'm going to start by introducing the folks from the Damerscott end. George Parker is the chair of the Waterfront Improvement Committee and also has been hired on a contractual basis to assist me in the overall management of the project from the town side. Dick McLean, long-term volunteer in the town and a member of our Waterfront Committee. Doug Morton, member of the Waterfront Committee. Ron Orenstein, who is past selectman and past resident of Damerscott, but now is continuing to stay involved from Florida, which is fantastic. Stephen Huffnagel is the executive director for Coastal Rivers Conservation Trust, but also a member of this group now. Haas Toby, member of the Waterfront Committee. Pete Slavinsky is a state marine geologist, and we're thrilled to have him part of this study and this project. Shari Sage is a member of our committee, has been since its inception. Bob Faunce is our town planner and also an expert on the coastal hazards in Lincoln County. Lacey is the construction manager on site, clerk of the works, if you will, for our restroom and sewer line project. So it's very much involved in this project. Alan McKinnon, who just got on, is a member of our Waterfront Committee and a landowner in the downtown area. Max Johnson is an employee for the Mid-Coast Economic Development, was instrumental in us getting the EDA grant, and Evan Hoke is from the Lincoln County News. And I'm hoping that Kai, who is the project manager at EDA and overseeing our project and the gatekeeper for the EDA funding, I'm hoping that he will be able to join us too, but I don't see him yet. So I don't, unless I left somebody out. Yeah, Jan, why don't you go ahead and do the introductions from the consultant side?
Sure, thank you. I'm Jan Wigman, the project manager for Wright Pierce and the overall project manager for this particular project. As you know, at Wright Pierce is teamed with MMI, and now is also known as SLR. And from SLR, we have Roy Schiff, and Dave Murphy and Noah Slovin, who all have worked together on assembling models and determining flood elevations and so forth. Mike Zarber, their project manager on their end. Jason Williams is on the call, the landscape architect, and Eric Teal, the geotechnical engineer. And then from our side, Ryan Wingard's on the call. He's the vice president for the civil infrastructure group and kind of lending some overall guidance to the project. And as Matt had mentioned, Lacey Kramer, who also is involved in doing some of the modeling, the stormwater modeling for this particular project. So that's the introduction. If you'd like, we can get started on the presentation. We've prepared a PowerPoint presentation, which we
I think what we'll do, again, just for expediency's sake, is we'll have your folks, I think Roy especially, give the presentation on the sea level rise issues, and then we'll take the questions and answers then, and then have Jason talk about the various design options that have been developed, and then after he gives his presentation, we'll have the Q&A for the committee members at that point. So,
Matt,
Matt, may I say something first?
yes.
This is Haas. I just want to share how thrilling it is to see this many people in the room on this topic. Since there are 3 or 4 guys here I'm looking at, but we first discussed it 9 years ago. And to see now that we have this focused attention and this expertise, it's just thrilling. So thank you.
Agreed. Well said.
Matt, this is Jason. Can I have access to share my screen?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Okay, you've got it.
Great.
Jan, do you want to lead out, or?
Sure. Well, as Matt had mentioned, this is an update, and what we've done is we've worked through a number of the issues. We're arriving at where the flood elevation is. We're arriving at potential solutions for the flood control end of things. And so it was great to get your input. At this point, we'd like to get the committee's input on some of the direction to pursue for our feasibility. When we start to pull our feasibility together, where, what options do we need to be looking hard at and pushing with the regulators, things like that. So that's kind of the juncture at which we're at right now, and we're really thrilled to be able to walk you through this particular presentation. So some of the project goals it would be to identify the. Can you hear me?
Yes.
And the screen's all set?
Hello.
Hi. We're going to identify, we've identified project flood protection features and priorities in the downtown. We've looked at the required flood elevations to meet regulatory approval. That'll be part of the discussion today. We've gained an understanding of some flood control devices and measures that can be used. And we've also got a better understanding now of the geotechnical situation at the site through some additional borings that we've taken and analysis we've looked at. We have reviewed some available data and that sort of stuff of studies and findings, are through looking at reviewing the regulations, we've come up with parameters around what we can use for design criteria and things things that'll determine the wall type and things like that. We can roll right into the wall height discussion if Roy wants to, Roy wants to take over at this point.
Sure. Thank you. Can you hear me, Jan?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks for having me. So I'd like to run through some of the existing information and calculations on the wall height. And just so you all know, we've had several conversations with the state floodplain managers and FEMA reviewers to really guide us through this design with the ultimate goal of protecting the downtown reducing the flood risk and how we can do that. And on the graphic on the left-hand side, you can see a few of the key water levels that summarize our findings. The first is the effective base flood at elevation 9.2 feet, NAVD 88. That's the 1% still water elevation. Moving up, we did a wave run-up calculation that's required for the FEMA analysis. And we found that the maximum run-up on a proposed wall would be 2.4 feet. We did many trials with different design waves, and this is the value, the average maximum value we came up with. And then we looked at some sea level rises scenarios, and we put the wall right now at what's known as the 2050 commit to manage level, which is 1.5 feet of sea level rise. And so this takes us to 13.1 feet NAVD 88, and that's our proposed wall elevation. And I'll talk a little more about that proposed elevation. And then finally, we have elevation 14.6, and that's a 3-foot sea level rise. That's the high level for 2050 prediction. And we've talked with Pete, who's on the phone, as well as others, and these are the management levels that the state of Maine is looking towards adopting. And so our thought is that maybe the wall could be extended to that height. Okay, next slide. So there are many requirements to building a wall, and I wrote the word levee in parentheses because in FEMA world, we're actually building a levee. Not that we anticipate it being an earthen embankment, but because we are designing this structure to remove the downtown from the special flood hazard area. It's a logistical definition, and because of that, we have to meet all of the criteria that are listed on the right-hand side of this graphic. So everything on the left is the same. And what you see is, for example, that we need to be 2 feet above the base flood, total still water storm surge, and wave setup, and that's 11.5 feet. So we meet that criteria. The highest criteria we need to meet is 1 foot above the maximum base flood run up on the wall. So that is 11.6 plus 1 feet. And then with just a little more elevation, we're actually at a 2050 sea level rise scenario that the state of Maine is going to adopt at 13.1 feet. So what we're seeing is this sea level rise scenario really gets us to all the top of the levee and the freeboard requirements that are required for the wall we're proposing. Jason, if you can go to the next slide. And on this slide, we just highlight the 2050 and 2100 sea level rise elements. And this shows that in 2100, this wall could be overtopped if these predictions that the state is considering play out. But if we go with a 14.6 extension, we're actually potentially going to meet the high 2050 predictions for sea level rise, gives us an added factor of safety. And the other thing I might add is we just learned that there was an executive order passed when the administration in Washington, D.C. changed that reinstated the federal flood risk management standards that increases the risk thresholds requirements for design. And the previous ones were 3 feet above the base flood plus your run up, which takes us to 14.6 feet. Now, this is like coming out as as we speak right now, as the administration changes. But if we have a wall that's at 13.1 and are able to adapt to 14.6, then we might be able to meet this higher level standard that might be present in the future. The one thing I'd add to the conversation before I pause and take questions is that the wave run-up analysis, there's a little bit of, there's a range of answers that we've incorporated on an average. So some of this, although we had 12.6, we come up to 13.1 to try to encompass the sea level rise scenario. And it also adds a little bit of factor of safety in case those higher waves do become incident on the wall down the road. So that's kind of why you see a little bit of padding. over this last arrow to get to that 13.1 foot level. So with that, I assume there are questions. I'm happy to pause and take some questions or hear comments.
I had a question. This is Stephen Huffnagel from Coastal Rivers. This is really a great graphic, and I really appreciate how that puts it all in perspective in a short spot. I'm just wondering, from a construction standpoint, I'm jumping right to it, but how, it seems like adding something later is often an expensive proposition. You're mobilized. I just completed a construction project last year for our organization, and mobilization was a lot of the expense.
Yeah.
As long as we're mobilized, is it going to add a ton to go a little higher?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess
So I can answer that.
You want to go ahead, Jason?
If you like. So Stephen, one of our thoughts, and we're going to be getting into this as we start designing the wall, is not to add a brand new constructed element on top of our already built wall, but during this construction to consider including an element that is almost like a pocket door that can be slid up manually from the type of wall to reach these future elevations.
Very cool. Thanks. That seems very cool.
Hey, Roy, this is Pete Slavinsky. I have a quick question on that last one as well. It actually relates to the possible FFRM. Wouldn't that, I'm just a little bit, so wouldn't that basically take the BFE, which is 10 feet, not the still water plus run up plus 3 feet, but the BFE plus 10 feet and add 3 feet to it? So the standard would be BFE plus 3 feet, not necessarily still water plus 3 feet plus 2.4. Or am I just misreading that?
No, I actually think you could be correct. I might have put a typo here. It was 3 feet above the 1%. I guess I'll have to go back and check. Again, so here's these standards, these FFRM standards were in place the previous administration, and there was clear guidance given on them. In some of our past work, we had reviewed the guidance for some resiliency projects. The guidance was reinstated, but the standards were not revisited. So I was actually hesitant to even put a standard, but I just wanted to give a ballpark. So I might have miswrote. This might be the 3 feet above the 1%. And if it is above the BFE, you're right, it would be a little bit higher because it would be above 10, like you just said. So I think the key here is to focus on the fact that there's likely federal risk management recommendations coming out that we want to consider as they get refined for the top of this wall. That might even be a little higher than this value. So thanks for bringing that up. I'll recheck that.
So one of the things that I just wanted to highlight is, while we are talking wall, and obviously that's our major priority, the community is looking to maintain this little narrow strip, this little linear park. And so we've got to make sure that we don't just build a wall and then as an afterthought design a park. We want to integrate our flood protection measure in red with our level park area and integrate that into our biotechnical living shoreline so that it all reads as one element and no piece looks like just an afterthought where we built a wall and then added on this park feature. So starting a project like this, we use precedent images to identify what is being done around the world in situations like this. How are designers getting people down to the water's edge or creating level areas for viewing the water. Whether it's a stepped waterfront like we're doing it currently in New Haven, or Hunters Point in Queens, where we have kind of this littoral shelf, or Dartmouth College project that Roy and I just did. We use these to essentially create that precedent so that we can build off of that and create maybe similar elements or new elements. So on our first concept, on all three of these concepts, north is straight up. You can see the southern buildings along Main Street at the top of the page, and our parking lot area here, and our thin little waterfront area here. Oh, let me try that again. Oops, I'm out of memory. Well, in all three concepts, we're thinking of how pedestrians are potentially getting to the waterfront. And so as somewhat of a baseline, we're using a center line drawing off of Taco Alley and people moving down. Also identifying that people could be coming from the west to access the site, or from the east or the west to access the site. In concept number one, pedestrians coming down Taco Alley enter a small gateway plaza with the relocated or a brand new wayfinding kiosk. As part of this concept, we'd be taking 3 parking areas to create this pedestrian safe access into the new parklet, but modifying some parking on the eastern edge so that we can create essentially 2 new parking spaces and add a walkway that gets pedestrians onto the area. Let me see if I can zoom in again. I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint real quick and reshare just so that I could zoom in here a little bit. I'm going to stop share and reshare briefly here. All righty. So this concept is a really organic concept. It has a lot of movement running around along the shoreline and is primarily made up of an interior walkway, the gray color identified as 9, that meanders along the entire space. In this concept, we're creating a 3-foot wide lawn snow shelf that's between the bumper of the car and our proposed flood wall, which is identified as number 2, which runs along the entire edge of the parking lot. The walkway meanders through our parklet and creates essentially 2 different types of seating areas, identified as 19, which would be an Adirondack style seating area made out of stabilized pea gravel, and then open lawn areas that would include benches and picnic tables, very similar to what we have now. The lawn areas are retained by boulders. And so you can see here down in these pictures, we kind of took some of the design elements of boulder stacking that you see in many, many situations in New England and wanted to incorporate them into what is now just kind of a boring, low habitat riprap slope. By bringing in boulders and not going beyond the existing surveyed edge of the existing riprap, we can use boulders to help and elevate some of the seating areas, but also some planting areas, almost a lower level littoral shelf where we would allow water to infiltrate in and then obviously bringing people closer to water. Throughout this area, we'd have all native plantings. On the western edge here, we have a new location for kayak storage. And our wall comes around our existing sewage facility with a gate that would go across the boat launching ramp. And our wall moves up along the existing riprap to the north. We'll get into some of the options for that in a bit. So if we look at some sections in 2 areas, the top area is this Adirondack seating area just against our 5-foot wall with the walking path in front, boulders retaining our new living shoreline. Oops. And our wall and our snow shelf with our walking path just beyond, just next to the wall with our bench and picnic table seating area along the water. So as you're walking through this park, you're experiencing really 2 different types of seating areas and features. If we go to concept number 2, we essentially go from concept 1, which is kind of beginner level. Now we're moving into kind of intermediate where we're upping the game a little bit. Again, centerline pedestrian access across 2 parking spaces, which we would take for pedestrian access, have textured or colored concrete or asphalt in this area with safety bollards that link people over through another parking lot to an open cantilevered deck area. This landing area would have an arched gateway area into it, and then identified as number 3, our new location for relocated wayfinding or kiosk, and this really large decking area with different seating elements and flags within it. In this concept, you can see our wall is curving a little bit. So we add a little bit of movement to the wall, bringing it into the space a little bit, which allows us to create some planting pockets on the parking side of this wall so that we can do a couple things. One, we could help to screen the long wall and get some tree plantings in there. Our pathway runs east to west throughout the park area and goes through stabilized pea gravel or stone dust and moves into these boardwalk features. And so you can imagine coming in, you've got seating options in this large boardwalk platform or decking platform in the shape of a sail, moving through to this boardwalk overlook that would have interpretive signage on it. But between these 2 elements, we have seating or steps that get us down to, again, another littoral shelf that is retained with boulder elements, with the intention that this area can all be inundated with water. If we move to the east here, we have another feature of our stairs coming down. And down here, you can see 2 areas elsewhere in the world where this has been done, where we've got seating moving down into the water, our boardwalk elements. And again, we're going to leave you with all of these plans so that everybody on the call can kind of go in and zoom in and see the different elements. Additionally, just beyond the boardwalk feature, we have a series of small seating walls where you can go and sit just behind the boardwalk as people are moving along the boardwalk and then access down. New kayak storage, our gateway, our gate going across the boat launching ramp, and our wall to the north. 2 cross sections that depict the different areas that you'd be moving through with our upper walkway and terrace steps going down to our living shoreline, as well as the seating element that's integrated into the flood wall with a walkway and our cantilevered boardwalk section. Now on the right-hand side here is, I think, a really interesting perspective. I had mentioned our gateway arch feature and our flagpoles. We would have our interpretive signage at this point. But again, remember, if we're starting at approximately elevation 8 and we're building up to 13, we've got a 5-foot high wall. Now, there's two ways at looking at this. Currently, you're in the parking lot and you're walking behind cars, and you can see out to the water. You can see the back of people sitting on the benches. And so there's a real integration visually with the parking and our linear park. Once a 5-foot wall comes up, it's going to make a very, very clear distinction between vehicular use area and pedestrian use area. Now, we can explore what that means. Positively, if you are in the waterfront park, you're not seeing shiny cars and bumpers and lights. You're really integrated more with the river than you are with kind of the vehicular component. But we may want to also consider having breaks in the wall, as you can see here, that do allow people on Main Street coming into the parking lot or getting out of your car to still see the water. Now, while we call this out as a transparent glass interval, this is kind of one of the elements, Stephen, that I was mentioning, whether, moving a pocket door up to get to that 14.6 elevation, or doing the same thing by having cutouts in the wall with the wall at elevation 13, if we decide that's the elevation, and having panels that slide down into the wall. So we have these breaks that are moving along the entire length of the wall, still allowing those views out and allowing people in the parking area to see people moving by in this area, which is almost a level of marketing, like, hey, let's go check out what's going on the other side of that wall. Concept 3, again, now goes into a really higher level. In concept 3, we use the same elements of pedestrian safety to get people clearly onto our linear park. We have a straight section of wall that is just beyond the bumpers of the car. So we've removed that 3-foot snow shelf to gain us a little bit more room. Concept 3 includes a series of level platforms at varying elevations with walkways that move between them on slopes. Because we have such a long expanse here, we would never need handicap railings on ramps. They'd be very, very gentle slopes. And I just want to show you down here this illustration, item number 9, that shows essentially what concept 3 is getting at, where we have these large opening spaces for gathering and seating, but then these walkway features that move up and down the coastline. What's really interesting about this is if you do come into our main plaza here, you're overlooking another plaza. If you move to the east here, you're walking down a very gentle ramp in between the wall and vegetation. So you can imagine this vegetation could be a native grass coming 3 or 4 feet up. So you're immediately immersed in the living shoreline. As you come down here, you can see the lighter color open plaza spaces. And from these plaza spaces, steps that get you right down to the water. This entire area could be inundated with water, and the elevations of these would really have to be thought out. Between these cream level seating areas, again, we'd have littoral shelves built in that could be inundated with water. So plaza number 14, you can almost imagine during a high tide, you're almost surrounded on 3 sides by water, and you really feel that you're a part of the river. For concept 3, we developed an elevation that really, I think, gets to the different grade changes. So on the center line here with Taco Alley, you'd come to a main plaza with seating, and walkways would move you down to these additional seating areas. There's a total of 3 of them with steps that you can sit on that go right down into the water. On both sides, the anchoring of our littoral shelves. And as you can see, our wall element gets taller as you move down. And this provides the opportunity for concrete form liner that could have imagery, whether it's sailboats or a school of fish or whales, that when viewed from the water would be really, really striking. And so by modifying the change in topography, we are really getting as much space as we possibly can in this linear park feature here. One of our thoughts for the plaza spaces would be that all of the piers would be installed on site, and these lighter colored plaza areas would be made up of precast concrete panels that would be delivered to site and craned or with a large excavator placed onto the structural members to support this, to support the plaza features. So one of the things is there are a lot of elements in all of these concepts. And like I said, I think the best option for comment, for review and comment, is to leave these concepts with you. Because really after this presentation, we really need to hammer down what concept we think we would like to go with and start moving towards some more refined design and regulatory process. So as I had mentioned on the previous concept, here you can see an enlargement. Here's Narragansett leathers and the fish market. And to the west here, the bridge over the river. So everything that I have just explained is down to the east, down in this area. In all three concepts, our flood walls is going to be coming up from the south, and we get to a really critical area here. And this is really, I think, one of the more important decisions that this committee needs to make. Over here is our elevation 13. You can see it closes in on itself right here. And so in order to protect Main Street at this elevation 13, you can imagine all of the water is rising from here. We've got to get our flood protective structure to this elevation 13. And there's really 4 options to do that, but they all have obviously pros and cons. Red solid is our wall coming up in our decision point. The first option, number 2, is to continue this wall up along Main Street and potentially dye it into the corner of the building, or drop it down into a ramp, pedestrian ramp, curb structure that ties into element number 5. Or it could come up and dye right into the building. The pros is that this length is not very long, but as you know, we've got 2 access ways coming out of this existing building. We would essentially be creating an alleyway in this area and narrowing down our entrance and exit coming into the site. To do this, we'd likely have this as an in-only entrance coming off of Main Street into our site. If we do this option, this building would be prone to the floods that are coming in. Option number 3 takes the wall and wraps it around, protecting the building and up into our number 5 element. Option number 4 looks at tying it into this lower southeast corner of the building and flood proofing this building. So the side of the building becomes our flood protection element. And number 5 identifies what would be required to continue up to the 13. And on the right-hand side, you can see I've matched the color and the implications for that. So in the bottom of this photo is approximately, well, right here, is approximately that elevation 13. So it's very likely that we can raise this 90-degree parking, making sure that we have positive pitch out to Main Street from the existing curb and sidewalk of this establishment to maintain that elevation 13. As we then move farther down into this area, we're going to really have to be creative because we do have this entrance coming into our gravel parking area here and what that looks like. Is this entrance a small ramp similar to an elevated crosswalk that you see in some cities? And really, you know, I think moving forward is we're going to have to decide exactly what that looks like. The number 5 element is not a huge concern. It's very, very doable design-wise and engineering-wise, but the red, the blue, and the green is something that I think really needs to be discussed. Now, Matt, I didn't know if we wanted at this point to open up any comment or if we wanted to continue on the presentation.
If it's okay with everyone, let's continue on the conversation. And I have Barnaby Porter on my iPhone. He wasn't able to get linked up with the site, so he's also listening in, and we'll need to share the video with him later. But, well, why don't we, if anyone has a quick question now, let's get that out now. I know Alan may have some questions because the last part of this discussion had to do with his property. Are there any questions?
This is Haas. It's always been,
Yeah.
and it has always been my assumption, and I felt it was assumption in the conversations I've been in, that we basically do the green number 3 and the 5, and that we were going to have some sort of floodgate going down into this general parking area. So I'm just saying that's what I've always assumed in the conversations I've been in. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, this is Alan.
Go ahead, Alan, and then Shari has a question.
Okay, I would prefer that number 2 didn't work, was not the choice.
Oh gosh, Alan, you're breaking up a little bit.
I don't know why.
That's okay now. You're okay now.
Okay, I was too close maybe. I would prefer that we did not use the number 2, the red line. It creates access problems to the building. And it leaves us unprotected. And I would somehow like to work in the green dotted line makes sense to me. If that's possible to do with all the rules that are involved in going onto private property.
I really got very little of your observations, Alan, breaking up a lot.
I was able to hear him. What Alan was saying is he would really prefer number 3, the green element, so that the building is protected. Obviously, the one element is that we are going on to now private property.
I'll echo Haas that from early on that had sort of been my impression that was an effort we were going to make, was the green.
If we can stay close to our building, we stay on our property and we don't involve students.
Okay. Shari and then Doug.
Going back to the beginning of the presentation, when you had 1, 2, and 3 design elements, it looked like the first one and the last one had the edge right up to the riprap and
yes.
more accessible maintenance of this currently actually already established, plus the build on with the boulders. Number 2, though, with the boardwalk, seems to, from the side, go the side image. Next one, there you go. Down through, I don't know if you can see my pointer, the lady taking the picture. It looks like you're having a bit of you're hiding or you're inhibiting rather the access to the riprap, which would probably be a bit more expensive to maintain and repair if needed. So I'm going either, I'm leaning towards more the first one or the third one, because I don't want the future expense of having to do something a little trickier with the riprap.
Okay, great.
And also, if I can ask, do you have an approximate percentage? You said the first one is the most cost effective, then the middle one, and then the third. Do you have a ballpark idea of how much more it would be to go from 1 to 3?
No, we haven't done any cost estimates.
Okay.
But that is something that we're going to be looking at. So, you know, there's a lot of factors, and I don't want to get too much hung up on costs. But yeah, you know, anytime we're adding structural elements into the plan, then, you know, there's the added cost of excavation, potential coffer footings, and things like that.
Jason, this is Roy again. Not to interrupt, but I think something we always discuss is that you can choose a concept, but you can also pick elements from each concept that resonate with you, and those can kind of be brought back together in another concept. I just wanted to share that with the group because that's always happened. I think in many of our designs we've worked on together, it's like there's a main concept, but then elements from some of the other ones come together.
Right. Like for an example, going off what Roy was saying, let's say concept number 1 is really, really liked, but the large entry deck feature is also an interesting element. This deck element could easily be incorporated into concept 1, as well as the stepped amphitheater seating that goes down. Any elements can be merged.
Would that deck though cover the riprap?
Yes, it would.
All right. Obviously, you can tell I'm a big fan of not covering the riprap. Okay, because in the first plan, that nice waving walkway that goes from one end to the other, that's a nice feature. It makes you want to take your time, some meandering. Also, I think it gives you a bit more privacy than one large walking expanse. So I
would support Sherry in that. I would go further. I would say number 1 is the only one that looks like Maine to me, or comes close to being able to be made to look like Maine. The other 2 look like metropolitan areas or larger cities. They don't. This one you can almost get lost in nature in it, which is what we expect in Maine. That's there. You've got I would go with 1. And maybe you want 1 feature from 2 or 3, but I would go with number 1.
Yeah, I very much like number 1. It's cheapest.
Do these heights, the 13.1 and 14.6, do they match with the heights that are given in a typical by the Coast Guard for the heights that are shown on height maps? I mean,
I think what you're talking about is what the benchmark elevation or the
correct
the elevation datum is, and they all go with NAV 88, NAV D88, which I'm not sure exactly what the Coast Guard uses, but all the elevations on this plan are tied to those benchmarks, which are then again
mean low water.
by FEMA.
Does it go to mean low water?
There is a mean low water elevation.
So you can see mean low water is down at -5, mean high water -4.29.
No, plus 4.
Plus rather, sorry, plus.
No, that's not correct.
Dick McLean has had his hand up.
Despite my coming question, I'll say that I really, really liked concept number 1. But for concept number 3, the sloped walkways that you described as being a very, very gentle slope, if there's any proportionality at all to your drawing, not this one, but you had a different view of it. Speaking as someone who was raised with handicapped people, those still look like somewhat difficult slopes for a lot of people.
Yeah, these, so the elevations of this would need to be worked out a little bit more. But what I did is I took the plan view, and this is, somewhat of a graphic representation. I did grade this area out preliminarily, and we can easily get 3% slopes on these walks that get us kind of to these overlook areas. And we would definitely keep it nice and gradual. But you're right, Dick. The elevation is a little bit misleading, and we'll fix that up.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked it that way. Let's just say overall with any of these, I want us to keep accessibility to the forefront.
I agree.
Well, and looking at the slopes that are depicted in this picture, it looks more like a roller coaster than handicapped accessible. I mean, you look at those slopes.
Yeah, right. But I just didn't know,
Yeah.
Jason spoke to it. I just didn't know whether or not that was.
I think Jason said that they would adjust that so that it would be handicapped accessible, meet ADA requirements. I'm going to go to Stephen. He has his hand up.
Oh, thanks, Matt. First of all, so appreciate the 3 different options as a way to provoke discussion. And I had a few points. I love the idea of seeing the people down by the water and having some at least some pocket views in to see the activity. And I like the pedestrian piece of safety getting to the water as well. So in 2 of the 3, you show the safe islands coming through Taco Alley. And that seems really important. Just as a user of the parking lot, that wall of cars between the main street and the water dissuades people from going down, and having a safe access or through point seems very important. Another comment is Misery Gulch, that with the wall moving around we talked about the different options for how to protect the building with the leather store. That is there some way to incorporate a crossover of pedestrian access directly from the parking lot in front, or that may be something that was ruled out long ago, but way in history, we talked about some pedestrian connection across Misery Gulch. And if construction's happening, is there a way to connect a pedestrian crossing from the parking lot over to the schooner landing as a piece of it? And finally, in the 3rd drawing, just looking at people and what they do down by the waterfront, where I spend a lot of time, especially when it's ice cream season. People want to get to the water, so they go down and they walk on the riprap, and that's currently somewhat dangerous. And I think one of the design elements that I really appreciated was the steps down to the water, because people want to look in. There's a toddler who wants to walk down with their parents and check out the horseshoe crabs that are assembling. So some way to safely get people down to the water in a stepwise fashion seems valuable. So just a few comments that sort of pull in a few of the elements.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks.
I like the concept number 1 as that Hollis and mentioned, and I like the swinging doors on the ramp to the water episode. Those doors should swing out so that when they're closed, they reach they are held firmly in place. And I like the steps down, the steps down to the water are nice, but they're gonna be expensive. I don't like a wooden boardwalk. We'd have a maintenance problem.
So I'm going to go to Bob Faunce and then Pete and Dick and Max. So when you raise your hand, I'll keep you in the order in which you raise your hand. But Bob, go next.
Yeah, two things. First of all, I was going to remind everyone that we got 24 people on the line, and you really have to raise your hand rather than have the conversation back and forth. But I think the question was, how does this relate to the Coast Guard elevations? And I think you're referring to the tide tables.
Yes, tide table.
Yeah, as I recall, the tide tables are roughly 6 feet higher than these NAVD 88 elevations. If I'm Pete, if you're on the call, I think we've talked about this before, and I think that's it. So if you add 6 feet to the elevations on this, that's where you come up with the tide table.
That can't possibly be true. The mean low water they start at.
Well, let's get David, we'll get a clarification on that and send that out to you, subsequent to this call. Bob, did you have another point?
No, I did not.
Okay. Pete?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to share the thought. Part of this project is to create resiliency for the town, and the wall is creating the resiliency. But in addition to that, is it creating resiliency along your waterfront? So it's kind of simplifying what's nearest the water is actually keeping structures out of harm's way. So building more structures in and over the water is a little counterintuitive to the concept of actually creating more open space to kind of slow down the water as it's approaching the wall if you do have a big surge or waves. From a personal standpoint, I like concept number one. My second question, so that's a comment. My second question, and this might be getting way too early in this, but are you folks proposing that the riprap that is there would be reused to create some of these walls, or is it of inadequate sizing to actually do that? So those are my two comments and questions. Thanks.
Yeah, we definitely want to try and reuse as much as possible, but it's not adequately sized. We're going to have to bring in some bigger boulders, Pete, mainly because a lot of the riprap out there is 6 inches. So, a rip piece of stone only gets us up 6 inches. So if we could get boulders that are 36 inches, we've now tripled the amount of elevation that we can get to retain some of these features. But I think we want to reuse as much as we possibly can. And really link and key them into any of the new boulders that we bring in. Very similar to this image down here, where we've got larger boulders interspersed with the smaller boulders.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Dick?
I think it was Stephen threw out a word that reminded me of something I should say out loud. Stephen used the word icing. If you gentlemen haven't been here in the winter, and this winter isn't doing it, as not these gross designs, but once a gross design is selected and you start getting more finite in the designs, just be aware of the fact that in this harbor, we can get ice flows pushed up hard against the ground. And I'm not talking about sea level rise. I'm just saying that be aware that stuff that's right down along the edge could get chewed up in a hard winter.
That's a great point.
Matt, am I visible to you?
No, I don't see your hand going up. But let
Oh,
me
I've been
we'll
waving
go-
my hand for 10 minutes.
Oh, by waving your hand, I mean, click the raise your hand button, because I can't see everybody with the.
Oh, I didn't even see one of those. Okay.
Go ahead,
They can
Doug.
just go before me if you want.
Go ahead, Doug.
Oh, well, what I'm hearing and very encouraged by, it sounds like everybody, well, a lot of people are up for option one. The thing that bothers me about both 2 and 3 even more so, is there's an awful lot of mechanical interfaces that have to take place to make that all come together and maintenance wise. Plus, the whole objective here is to build a barrier that's good till 2050. And with all these low-level seats and apparatuses, I mean, technically, they could be all underwater fairly permanently in 10 or 15 years. So do we really want to invest that kind of money in steps and things that are going to be underwater? So that's my first concern on that. And then if you go back to the wall demarcation efforts. There. The only thing that concerns me here is, if we all remember the history, we decided the walkover probably was not a good idea politically, if nothing else, because it's servicing a private place. I know I'm not going to be made, nobody's going to love me for this, but aren't we doing the same thing with the green line here? We're obviously going to cost us more to do that. And if we did the dotted line that's right against the building, that's pretty cool. But again, we're favoring that building and favoring the building and that building is a piece of private residence. The town doesn't own it. Your thoughts on that?
Nor does the town own any of the buildings along the south side.
That's correct, but that's my point. We do own the parking lot though, and that gives us the right to do what we're doing without getting into conflict of interest with private parties.
The other point on that, and Alan can respond as well, but I like the idea of the walkway behind the Narragansett Leathers building, just because it reduces the pedestrian traffic on Main Street and a very bad intersection there with the driveway and the Main Street sidewalk.
Okay, yeah, I like that idea too. I'm just questioning whether we're walking a fine line here, protecting a private facility versus the town's own property. Otherwise, why wouldn't the people say, hey, you're protecting this building, why not you build me a bridge and protect my building? Have we got an answer for that? Why wouldn't we protect their building?
We are protecting. You mean
Schooner Landing, I'm talking about.
Buildings that we're protecting downtown?
No, Schooner Landing. I mean, we're protecting all of these buildings on Main Street, but we're not protecting Schooner Landing, yet we're going to protect this one building.
I don't think it's possible to protect Schooner Landing. I've had that discussion with the owner there. I just don't think that's feasible. But again, maybe Wright Pierce and SLR can address that.
Don't misunderstand. I don't want to protect Schooner Landing, but I'm saying I can see their argument saying, hey, you're protecting that building. Why aren't you protecting my building? It's in the same environment. It's that same problem, Maybe I'm overthinking it.
Well, I have a different memory of the history. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here. All the conversations I recall, we were working with Alan. We were looking at the parking lot, and we were looking at the flow of traffic from the parking lot out into the street. And we were looking at relieving the pedestrian congestion there, getting out from the parking lot out into the street by having a walkway around the outside of Alan's property so that pedestrians could get to the street without clogging that entry to the parking lot and have that be cars only. This was an important part of the conversation, as I recall.
And that's a very good logical reason to do this. And it would probably hold up well under examination. But the other issue involved with that is where does the majority of the foot traffic come from off of Main Street? Comes off the south side coming in. I mean, the east side, not the west side. So unless you're going to post it that you can't walk down that way.
I'm going to let, I think we'll have a follow-up discussion with just the committee and maybe do that in another week or so. So we can these issues a little more. I'm going to go to
humor me 1 more minute and then I'll be done. The last thing I wanted to ask about was, have you considered at all, what happened to the thought about putting a bit more fill on the waterfront side of the parking lot? Is that completely gone away now? You said you did more borings. What did you find out?
We are going to get into that. But adding more fill in the parking lot area is going to be a little bit of a problem based on existing utilities. But that's not to say that we can't add a little bit more that, gets us up to maybe elevation 9 at the waterfront park area.
Okay,
all of that we'll have to look at.
That being said, I think that's very important for the boat launch, because if the boat launch stays where it is, it's going to be flooding relatively soon, which means the gates are going to be closed a lot more often, right?
Okay. I'm going to go to, go ahead. Someone want to answer that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the parking area, we're going to be looking at all of the grades in here and what are the options. Obviously, if we raise grades down here, we've got to rebuild a section of the ramp, making it steeper. So that is one element that we're going to have to look at. But really, can we take maybe this drive aisle? You can imagine saw cutting the asphalt, blending it in on the east and the west, and raising this parking a little bit so that the cars are sitting on a 3% grade that then has a curb that gets us up another 6 inches. And as we move in to the park, we're up now potentially 12 inches. All of that we're going to be looking at.
Okay. And I know that's part of the discussion that's going to continue after a couple more questions here too. Max and then Bob.
Well, I'll try and be quick then. I'm not part of the committee, so I don't know how much my input will be taken. But what I was going to say was, first of all, I like concept 1. That's me as a resident of Damerscott. I like that a lot more. I feel that's a lot easier for people to walk on and still have that same type of feeling as they do right now. And then just a little tad personal me thing. I think on this one, if you scroll down just a bit, didn't you have like seats in the walls or something? Was that something, or am I?
Yep, that's part of concept number 2 right here.
Yeah, that one. I mean, that's just my own personal thing. Just get a few more seats there. I think that might be good, but I'll leave that to the committee for what they want to do on that. The other thing I was just going to say, with whether it's the green space we're talking about over here or the wall for the gulch area, I was just going to say, for me, that all comes down to cost, just because of the project as a whole. We have the set amount coming from the EDA, and I'm just always that cautious guy. I want to make sure we're in budget. I don't want the town to be spending a lot more on that. But the other thing I wanted to get on was what I was actually talking about with the wall going around the business. I am just also saying that, please. I get it. It would be great to just get all the buildings in the flood zone. I don't know. Me being a bit ignorant, not being at all these meetings, but has anyone spoken to the owner of this building, or is the owner of the building in the meeting right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Leather Building is owned by Alan, who's on the call right now.
Okay. I didn't know what Alan's thought was on this, and I agree with Doug. We're doing this big federal project to kind of protect town-owned land, and now we're carving out just to protect this one specific building. I mean, we didn't do the north parking lot because that was going to be privately owned and used. We didn't do it for all other spots, so I'm for one a bit on the fence of just us using these funds to also give a protection to this one specific building. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. I'll let Alan respond too, but I just want to note that we're not trying to protect the asphalt parking lot, but we're really trying to protect the buildings adjacent to the parking lot in the southern part of our downtown. Alan, would you go ahead?
Yes. I'd like to remind everybody that the red line, which leaves us out, is also on our property.
Right.
We own half of that alley.
That's right. Yeah, the dashed line that you see is the black dash line that you see on that design drawing is the boundary for the town versus Allen. It
So
splits
you have
up.
no choice but to go onto our property no matter what you do.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing I just want to clarify here is this red dashed line, you know, well, I'll save it for another time. What I was going to say is, I guess the other option is to come all the way up and come across, but there's a lot of conflict here. You can see our elevation 10, top of walls at 3. So how do we move people across the front of this building at 10.5? You know, when we got this 3-foot wall that we're trying to tie in. So.
And one other point, if the alley became one way in, which at one time I was in favor of, think about what the other end of the parking lot is going to be like with one way out. Trying to
Down
get back onto Main Street.
onto Water Street. Yeah.
Water and then Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be a madhouse up there.
Yeah.
Water could remain as two-way.
Well, water would remain as two-way, but the only other public access point would be on Water in the driveway going to it. So you'd be diverting all the outgoing traffic, the exiting traffic to Water Street and then onto Main.
I just want to say I'm surprised we're having this conversation because
Okay,
I
but
thought we had decided this long ago, and that we had decided in terms of a total unified sense of the parking lot and the buildings around it and preserving the downtown.
I'm going to go to Bob, Dick, and then Stephen again.
Okay.
Bob?
So looking at this green dashed line, first of all, comment that I think it's important to be able to separate pedestrian traffic from that access point. I don't know how many times I've encountered pedestrians using that when cars are entering and exiting. The second point is we have an engineering challenge. Somehow we have to provide flood protection out there. And the only practical way is to go behind that building or flood-proof the building. Matt, I have a question for you. What type of interest would the town have to have in that area where the green dash line is to qualify under EDA? The question is, could they, if they acquired an easement from Allen, would that suffice, or would they have to acquire fee in the area that wall/pedestrian walkway would be?
I believe an easement would suffice, but I'd have to do some research on that.
I believe you're correct. This is John. From my past dealings with EDA, an easement would suffice. You have to be able to show right title and interest and to be able to do what you want to do.
Well, it seems to me that that's the practical solution. And it's not so much protecting that building, but somehow you've got to make the connection.
Right.
So you have to do it somehow. And that seems to be the only way that you could do it. And that building benefits, but it doesn't benefit really any more than any other downtown buildings.
Mm-hmm. Right. Dick and then Stephen.
Way back to when I was on the Board of Selectmen, and we were really starting to look at issues. While, like everybody else, I'm concerned about being able to preserve the parking lot, and it's important. Its importance to us as a town. My graver concern has always been the buildings along the south side of Main Street. That they're at this point seriously in danger of what will come from rising water. And if the minute that those buildings are in danger, we've got a to me unreconcilable economic disaster on our hands. One of the reasons that I've not at all been appalled by the cost that we were looking at to get something done, because to me it greatly is less than what would happen if we had to abandon a big swath of the south side of Main Street. And so that's my focus. In the process, we protect the parking lot, and that's important, but we need to protect the south side of Main Street.
Mhm. Thanks. Stephen?
Dick really said it better than I did, but than I was thinking, which is just to say we're investing in the future vibrancy of Damascata, which everything else financially hinges upon. So including more buildings in the envelope of this thriving downtown and keeping that going longer is all to the good of our success collectively.
Very good. Thanks, Stephen. Jason,
Let's move on.
Why don't you continue?
I'm going to turn this slide over to Eric Teal, our geotechnical engineer.
Okay, folks. So we've were able to put in 2, 4, 6 test borings out there about a month and a half ago. We had 4 of them down along where this flood wall would be located, and then 1 up in the interior of the parking lot, and then 1 up by there's 4 variations here that we're talking about near the building along Main Street. The depiction to the right of this test boring location plan gives a rough idea of what the borings have encountered. In general, along the seawall line there, along the riprap, what we have is between 10 to 14 feet of sand, silt, and gravel fill material. It's miscellaneous fill that you probably know better than I do, has been placed there over the years. But the bottom of that fill material appears to vary anywhere from about elevation -2 to elevation -5, roughly. And then underneath that fill material and some of the silty material with organics in it, we have these marine clays. Now these marine clays are very soft material. They're highly compressible. We've found those below the fill at depths of about 10 to 15 feet in thickness. And what that means is that we've got a reasonably thick layer of highly compressible soft clay material. And the implications there are that if we add load on top of that, and that could be spread footing foundations, that could be raise and grade. If we add more than a very nominal amount, we get a fair amount of settlement. These are what we call normally consolidated clays, meaning right now they haven't experienced higher loads on them than what's existing. So you add a little bit of load and you get a fair amount of settlement. And that settlement is not instantaneous or elastic. It's plastic, meaning it can take many years for that settlement to occur. Underneath the marine clays, there's a relatively thin 1 to 5 foot thick layer of very dense glacial till, or as we call it, hard pan underneath the clays. And then below that are variably weathered bedrock and hard bedrock underneath that. Jason, I can go into the implications for the seawall. Did you have?
Yeah, sure. So we looked at we developed 4 concepts for proposed seawalls. Eric, myself, worked with our structural engineer, Kishore, to develop these wall options. And I think, Eric, what would be good is an explanation as to why we need to go so deep.
Sure. So there are a couple of implications based on these subsurface conditions. The upper granular material, the film material, has a variable amount of silt or clay silt mixed in it, but it's basically a moderately permeable soil, so that during flood conditions, as the seawall keeps water off the parking lot, in essence, it becomes a dam. And we have seepage forces, water is wanting to pass underneath the wall, underneath the footing of a wall, and then create uplift pressures underneath the pavement on the land side of the wall. It's just an unbalanced load of hydrostatic forces. So what first thing you look at is, well, how do we cut that off? Well, we can take our foundation for the wall and we drop that down into the upper foot or two of these soft clays, because the clays are, for all intents and purposes, are impervious material. Water's not going to go through that during the duration of a storm event. So we don't need to worry about that. The only problem is the soft clays don't provide any vertical bearing capacity support for us. So then what we have to do is take our foundation element and carry that down until we get into the thin till layer, which is proximate with the top of the weathered bedrock or the hard bedrock. So clearly we're not going to dig an excavation that's going to take us down somewhere around 21, 25, 26 feet below the existing grades. So normally what's done in a case like this is you drive steel sheet piling. Steel sheet piling, the interlocks are sufficiently low permeable material, and so that gets away from the problem of having seepage forces going horizontally underneath the wall and then up and pushing up against the asphalt in the parking lot. And the steel sheet piling also gives us vertical support because the bottom of the sheet piling would be down in the till or the weathered bedrock material. And the loads on a seawall here, depending on what kind of a wall is selected, are not that great, but there's a significant overturning moment due to the unbalanced hydrostatic pressures from when the flood gets up to the top of the wall, plus the dynamic forces of the waves. All that can be resisted by fairly stiff steel sheet piling. So that's the steel sheet piling, in essence, would be extended up to a little bit less than the top of the wall. And then there would be concrete, I'll call it a facade, but concrete on either side, wood facing, lots of different architectural options to hide the steel sheet piling as it sticks up. And also it provides a very easy and economical way to increase the height of the wall by a couple of feet down the road when you need to, because you can always, if need be, weld a 2-foot extension on top of the steel sheet piling and then extend your facade wall up beyond that. Up on option 1, you'll see some H piling integral with the steel sheet piling. The H piling there would be to support a footing for a seawall. If we went with more of a conventional reinforced concrete wall with a footing that would be supported by the grade beams. If we go with more of a linear feature, such as an option 2, that would be supported by the steel sheet piling. We would need H piles, steel H piles to support it. And again, the steel sheet piling would be structurally significant enough to withstand the horizontal and the bending moments due to wave run up and the hydrostatic loads. So it looks like that the solution here, depending on the wall that's going to be selected, is going to be a row of steel sheet piling. And if it's a linear wall, then the H piles wouldn't be necessary. If it turns out to be a larger, robust, heavy wall that has eccentric loads to it, then the H piles would be necessary. So
yes, so just so I could pick up on that, Eric, most people are they're never going to know and they're never going to see what is below grade. And so with the sheet pile, Eric had mentioned that there are different options that we could do, whether it's a concrete wall with a concrete form liner on it, or sheet piling with precast concrete panels that are placed around the H piles, and sheet piling that can be in different stone patterns, or even taking wood, whether it's ipe or cedar in different sizes, and cladding that right to the above grade sheet pile. There's a lot of different aesthetic options that we can incorporate into it.
Sorry, can I ask you a quick question? I know that I put out a bunch of information about log type temporary fixtures that would bring the height up during storms and be removable during non-storms. Looking at your center picture with the gray wall, it would seem almost perfect to me if those vertical stanchions went up another 1.5 feet, you could easily drop the logs in there when needed and remove them when you didn't need them, thus keeping the overall height of the wall much shorter with just the stanchions standing higher. What's wrong with that thought?
So what you were saying is maintain the columns coming up. Maybe we have half a seating wall, but then put in upper panels that slide in during that. That's definitely an option. It's essentially like putting a weir board in a spillway of a dam.
And that seems to, I mean, we're all talking about the aesthetics of this high wall. It seems like that's a very good solution, because more often than not, you wouldn't need them, but when you needed them, you just drop them in. Comments on that?
I think I think that's definitely something we could look at. The one thing aesthetically we just have to be careful of is how high these columns are sticking up in the air. And I'm sure you've seen this before in a residential kind of area where somebody has designed columns to their driveway with a wall next to it, and the columns are way taller than the actual wall is.
Right.
It looks silly.
It does, but we're talking essentially 1 foot to 18 inches to keep that height below 2.5 to 3 foot instead of 4.5 feet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'll just hop in real quick. Roy might have more to say about this too, but just one potential concern with that would be FEMA certification of it as a levee, where every time you add one more piece that needs to be, manually installed or uninstalled before a storm adds one more complication from their perspective in terms of making it certifiable. So having a couple of gates to allow pedestrian access or cars to get through can be okay, but then having like a full length of wall that you have to install every time would present challenges with getting a FEMA certification as a levee in order to give that Clomer the letter of merit.
Okay. Well, the last time we discussed this, they said it was acceptable to have temporary barrier placement. So if that's not true, then the topic's moot and I won't bring it up again.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that the idea that Jason had earlier of having a slat that goes down into the wall that you can pull up, that's similar to I think what you're talking about, Doug, and that might be a possibility as well.
Yeah, I think
that's even better. I agree.
Definitely, because I think, Noah, going off what you're saying is FEMA. If I worked for FEMA, I would say, well, in 10 years, I don't know where those boards are. Are they sitting at some DPW garage, and is management in place to get those on the site? And that seems a little iffy, but yeah, if they're integrated in the wall, that seems a lot more kind of approvable.
So I'm going to go to Dick, then George, and then Shari. Dick, did you still have some?
I had to unmute. I think I even took my hand down, but I'll just say that I've been intrigued by that particular log system that Doug brought up. I don't know yet that I'm convinced that it's the way to go, but one of the possible advantages is that for every foot of wall that we build tall, there's more objection from people as to it hides the harbor. That system looks to me like we could put those logs in place pretty semi permanently, except for the openings, to the necessary height to accomplish what we need to accomplish today. No higher, therefore no more objection. But as time went on, and it became necessary to start thinking about the wall being higher, at that point we could slide another foot width of logs into that thing or something like that. I agree. I don't like the idea of having to have Cheryl Pinkham run down and start putting slats in the wall. But so that a big piece of it would be permanent. But it's another way, like the sliding pocket door sort of thing. It's another way to look at how do we make that wall taller when it's needed and more palatable. That's all.
May I speak again, please? I agree that the internal shelf window kind of thing would probably be the most ideal. But in terms of storing the logs, it can easily be designed that the extra logs stow right next to the wall, right in front or in back of the wall.
Okay. Yeah. If I could I just add to really what Noah said? It just, I don't think it's that it can't be done. I think it complicates the certification process that you want to go through, because the plant, you have to have a very specific written out plan. And I believe you also have to exercise the plan, if I'm not mistaken, at least annually, to prove that you can keep that certification. So I don't think it's a problem that you want to try to use it as a temporary measure. Although my suggestion would be maybe use it as the future expansion of the wall in terms of height, rather than the main portion, simply because of the amount of logistics that go along with writing that plan, approving that plan, and making sure that you guys are able to execute that plan every time there's a potential flood situation. You're going to have to implement that process. So I just want to make sure you keep in mind the logistics that go along with the certification, because the plan has to be written, and then the town's going to have to prove year in and year out that you guys can actually operate and manage that plan to keep the certification.
So the trade-off becomes a shorter wall overall with temporary barriers, or a permanent wall all at a height, a much higher wall. So that's the two trade-offs.
Yeah, certainly that's the trade-off to it. I agree. George, go ahead.
Talking about this whole system, it would seem maybe a good compromise would be a hinged panel that would be down on, say, the park side. You could make it look so that, because it would be in place most of the time, but all you'd have to do is to swing that up in place, do what you need to do, rather than have to carry pieces and parts and stuff. I think probably be a more workable thing for FEMA certification, and it would, I think solve the problem too. So just wanted to add that in there.
Okay. Shari.
So two things. To put in these logs or extra panels, once the the wall starts to age, to start putting in the newer panels, or the lesser used panels, I think wouldn't aesthetically, it'd be pretty obvious what parts of the wall are, one period of time as opposed to another. So again, it's just aesthetics. And then I thought we had talked about something hydraulic, that when the water comes in, it elevates, or was that just in the pump system?
So,
I seem to recall that we discovered that FEMA approved those.
Oh, I missed that.
oh,
Okay.
maybe Jason can comment on that. I
There
think there
was,
was issues.
Yeah,
I can,
so
Or,
go ahead.
Jan, go ahead.
yeah, so one of our thoughts was if we do have this pocket feature that, remember, is going to be very tight in there. It's not going to be this loose wobbly thing. Can that be mechanically, hydraulically raised when the time comes? And the answer is yes, but what are the costs associated with that? Which are going to be a lot more than just pulling up a weir board. We've got mechanicals that we've got to worry about. Obviously, all the electrical runs. We've got safety concerns. What if someone is sitting on this portion of sunken wall and this thing malfunctions? I mean, I think there's a lot of things to think about.
And I think too, Jason, we had talked about there's hydraulically driven, meaning water driven gates that could be that would be below grade, for instance, at the boat ramp. That once the floodwaters got up to a certain elevation, it would inundate this underground structure and then float a gate up in place. Those are available, and there's several manufacturers of those. But there's concern in this particular application because of all the salt that we use, sands, things like that in the wintertime, ice that might be on top, things like that. So, for the automatic system that's driven by the water coming up and then, floating up a gate that would be then in place at the boat ramp or at one of the other openings might be a little bit problematic from how does it really work?
I just say, I think George had the perfect solution there with a drop swing gate. You just lift it up like the back of the tailgate of a pickup truck.
Okay, good. Yeah, that was a good question, Shari, because we did talk about that a while back. And Jan still has a presentation on the drainage portion of the project, the storm drainage portion. So I'm going to turn it over to him for that.
Thanks, Matt. One of the other things that we've looked at is what happens during a flood event where you've got this barrier and you've got rainwater falling on the parking lot, and obviously you don't want that inundation of water to then flood the parking lot and flood your buildings adjacent to your parking lot. So what we've done is we've looked at the parking lot and modeled that. We've looked at putting tide flex or one-way valves on the outlet pipes from the storm drain system that go out to the river, so that when the water levels in the river rise above the water level in the catch basins, that the water doesn't come back in, it stays out there. But in that situation, water can't flow out of the catch basin. So what do? We either looked at a couple of solutions, one to store the water underneath the parking lot during those tide cycles where the water's especially high, or pumping the runoff water out during those rain and storm and flood event situations. So on the next slide, well, first of all, before we do that, when we looked at storage of runoff of the runoff water, we looked at an underground tank system. These are like small plastic chambers that go together like big egg crates or something. And we looked at about a 45 by 300 by 2 to 3 feet deep system underneath the parking lot that's connected to the storm drain system. So when water starts to back up, it fills into this underground chamber, so to speak. And then by the time the tide cycle drops, the water in these systems will then flow out through the pipes because you've got enough head to oppose the head that's out in the river. So that was one that's the storage option, and the pump option is obviously you install a pump station, electrically driven, but you may have to have backup generation for it, and you'll have to have some fairly sizable pumps as well as systems in front of that to prevent debris and so forth from getting into the pump chamber and causing issues with that. We can go to the next slide, Jason. And then at the bottom, this here is our model that we've done. At the bottom of that, there should be an active bar. You can hit that. And what this shows is on the right-hand side is the water level on the outside of the wall. And when our storm first started, the water level was up high, and we had this big inundation, 100-year rain event, which filled up the pipes in the storage system and then drained out as the tide cycle dropped down. So that and you can see the red line is the line where the hydraulic grade line is, and it stays below the parking lot surface. So this is some of the result of some of the modeling we've done with the stormwater. So we feel fairly confident that we could design an underground storage system that works by gravity. Would require some maintenance, but as any storm system would, but it generally works by gravity and doesn't rely on pumps and other things. We'll also do a little bit more work to make sure that the pump to find out what the pump system costs versus this one, so we can get an understanding of that. And the next slide, we also completed some additional survey work, which Jason alluded to, especially in the area along Main Street on the west side of the project. So we've completed our picture of what's going on there from a topographical perspective. We'll go to the next slide. We've also started our utility review and discussions with Tidewater and CMP for trying to locate the utilities underground. Some of their initial concerns have to do with, whether or not their infrastructure will be flooded during these flood events. Obviously, we need to demonstrate to them that that is not going to be the case. And we're also talking with Tidewater about the feasibility of locating Wi-Fi equipment in the parking lot. One of the challenges is if we don't have utility poles to locate that material on, how do we locate it? And it may be light poles at that point or something else. So, but we're working through those issues. And then our final, where we're kind of looking at our next steps, and we're proceeding with engaging with the regulatory agencies regarding the environmental permitting aspects of these particular solutions that we're talking about, especially along the water, obviously, as well as FEMA, for making sure that what we are designing will meet their requirements and is something that they can get behind as well. So we expect to have something in later this month, pre-application meeting with Department of Environmental Protection, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and a bunch of their supporting agencies like Department of Marine Resources and so forth, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So we expect to have something set up with them later this month to at least introduce the project to them and get their initial feedback on what some of the issues might be with and what their concerns are with the proposed project. So we can factor that into our feasibility and our decisions moving forward.
Very good. Dick, you have a question?
Yeah, Matt, do we currently have fiber optic cabling running through the parking lot on those poles?
I know we have it on Main Street. I don't know if it's in the back of the lot or right along Main Street. I'm fairly sure it goes down the Main Street on the poles.
Just if that were the case, I didn't want that to get excluded from conversations with with overhead utility people, that's
Yeah.
all.
Right. Yeah, we've been.
I'm on Bristol near the hospital and I have fiber. So
No. Yeah, we've been in touch, as John said, we've been in touch with Tidewater, and, you know, they're going to be part of the solution that we come up with here. But, you know, definitely the preference is to have the utilities, electric and fiber and such underground, and then just have the lighting portion of it above ground. Stephen?
Thanks, Matt. I just, Jan, as you're looking at the drainage, I'm wondering if that might present an opportunity for filtration as well for the outbound water, given that there are a lot of oyster seed raised up in this area, and ways to improve water quality, even as we're also managing the storm runoff and containment of the stormwater and management of stormwater.
Mm-hmm.
So that's both,
Stephen, that's
oil separation, sediment,
yes,
and heavy metals. And
yes, there certainly can be those types of opportunities, and I think right off the bat, the oil separation is one that can be handled relatively easily inside these catch basin structures and so on and so forth. Filtration's a little bit more difficult in that we don't really have space if we and typically you do filtration you know, in a basin of some sorts, or you could do it underneath the parking lot, but that's also a relatively expensive alternative at this point. But we could certainly do, you know, initial oil separation and you know, solids and things like that, floatables. Keep those from entering the system beyond the catch basins.
We'll definitely want to keep that in the discussion as we go forward. To the maximum extent possible, we want to eliminate any runoff pollution into the river from the parking lot. So let's keep that in the forefront of the discussion.
Great, thanks so much.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to raise my hand electronically here. I can't see anything that lets me do that, but.
Let me go to Dick, then Haas, and then we'll go to you, Doug.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just, for Doug's purposes, if you go to the bottom of your screen, there's a menu. One of the options is reactions. Click that, you'll find various hand shapes that will allow you to do what you're doing.
Okay, thanks.
I'm just going to throw, I wanted to wait till we got through the technical stuff. But one last thing in favor of the park design option number 1 was several years back when we worked so hard to survey the citizens about what they liked about the town, what they wanted to retain about the town. One of the big things that was in there was the town's connection to nature. And I feel that option number 1 keeps us much more in that realm than as we get to 2 to 3 and start throwing in more and more artificial structures.
Okay. And Haas.
I just want to, I want to second what Dick just said, but I also want to strongly support what Stephen said. I felt Jan was not sufficiently enthusiastic as much as I would have liked him to be, but the filtering of that water, the cleaning of that water, I think is essential for the environment of Damascus, and I just want to underscore that.
Yeah, and we can certainly look into options as part of the overall project that would provide some you know, filtering of the water. Certainly.
Well, we're right now we have people tracking the quality of the water in the river constantly, and the place where the water is of the lowest quality is right there in the harbor, and we need anything we can do to clean it up will be welcome.
Doug?
Sorry, I was contemplating the water issue. What was I going to ask you? The moment has passed. Well, let me just say this. This went through my mind, and I don't really want to waste a lot of time with it. But with the bathroom now moved further back than this shows where the barber shop used to be. Would there be any sense at all in taking the center line of parking spaces and make it bow so that you can keep within your legal limits back out space-wise, and yet allow the parking lot to have a bow in it so that you could have even more green space down at the waterfront? Do you understand what I'm saying?
What locks us in, what's interesting is we tried to relay out this striping. It essentially comes
Yeah, it's
down to the
awful.
striping. And let me tell you, whoever originally did this striping knew what they were doing, because
Yeah.
we can get we could get about 1 foot off of the end of this striping here. That gets us a little bit on this side, but for the rest of the area, it's difficult. It's striped pretty good.
Yeah, right. Okay, I remember what I really wanted to say. We talked about the fact that we can't probably add a lot of fill because of the weight distribution issues. But as your last slide just showed, we're going to potentially put in a whole bunch of cavernous rain catching devices, which are going to take away a tremendous amount of weight, except for the time they're full of rain. So doesn't that compensate a great deal for adding more, for the ability to add more height to the parking lot?
Yeah, that's something we've thought about, Doug, and it could in those areas where you've got the chambers. Those chambers can't be located up against the wall, for instance, because you've got the utilities, you've got the sewer lines, you got the force main, the discharge line for the Damascotta, the Great Salt Bay Sewer District running down through there. So we have to be far enough away from those so that if they ever have to get out to their lines, then they won't have to dig up our system.
Right. Okay. I
And
understand.
so again, in the center of that parking lot, we may be able to pick that grade up a little bit, and maybe that would be fine. Because you'd be able to see better from the center of the parking lot versus the edge of it, where up against the water.
Okay. And the last thing I'll say today is we discussed a long time ago about burying the services in that parking lot. And somebody brought up the fact that if you redo the services to the buildings all have to be brought up to code. Is that still an issue?
It likely is. There, at least from the outside, where they connect, because currently it's all done by aerial and what have you. So,
I think at a minimum, what we'll want to do is have the conduit installed. I hope that at the point at which we're ready for construction, though, we do have that sorted out. So, even if we had to resort to the utility lines being run up the side of the buildings, at least we could remove most of the utility poles, not all the utility poles from the parking lot. But that's definitely something we need to work on, and we need to look at those business connections again and see what has to be done there. So we're about at 2 hours here. This has been a fantastic discussion. What I'd like to suggest is that we not try to make any decision right now, but Jan is going to send us a PowerPoint or the PDF file of these concepts, these various concepts. And what I'd like you all to do on the Waterfront Committee is review them over the next week, and we'll have a meeting. I'll try to schedule another Zoom meeting in a week, and we can maybe nail down what the committee's preference is with regard to the concepts that Jason described for us. And then from that, they'll be able to go. Wright Pierce will be able to go to FEMA with a tentative design and start that dialogue going. Does that sound okay to, well, if anyone disagrees with that approach, maybe speak now.
I'd like to say out loud, if I may, to the engineering team, thank you very much. This is, for me, has been one of the most helpful presentations we've had through this whole system, and very well done. Thank you very much.
Hear, hear.
Well said, Stephen. Yeah. No,
Bravo.
Appreciate that. And I think Bob and George and I were talking a little earlier, and what we really like is the creativity that went into coming up with some of these designs. I think we certainly have the elements of a solution here. So pretty exciting stuff. I for one am pretty psyched up about this. And so any concluding remarks, Jan?
No, I just want to say, I want to thank the committee for their input. We see our work as a collaboration with the committee, and the committee certainly has a lot of history and knowledge, and is very knowledgeable about the community and the area. And we're really excited to be able to be part of you sharing that with us, and we're glad to be moving on to the next step here.
Okay. Well, real good. I'll be back in touch, and then I will be sending out the recording of this call to everyone. And then there's a number of people who couldn't attend, and I promised them that they would get the recording as well. So we'll have both the recording and those PDF files going out. Okay.
Great.
I think that'll do it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Matt,
Yeah.
this Barnaby.
Hey, Barnaby,
I don't know.
how long have you been on?
Well, quite a while, but I don't know why I couldn't get on in the beginning. I did it over and over and over exactly the same way, and then all of a sudden I was in. So there was something peculiar.